stop and take a trip down on my block. Where you see hidden potential, young minds sharper than pencil. And ain't afraid to speak their mind if they got something against you. We standing with you, we tackle issues like civic pride. Hate will cease to exist, let's put our differences aside. From my side to your side, from Dutchtown to South Side, from Penrose to North Side, from Benton Park to Old North to West End to West Side. We blessed when we step out, we stand down, rise up, stand together, wise up.
This is StitchCast Studio, produced by St. Louis Story Stitchers in St. Louis, Missouri.
This discussion taps into an ongoing topic that we've been visiting. Our series on fear, misunderstandings, and hate. Our title today is Neurodivergent, Part 2, with an emphasis on ADHD. Check out the discussion with our youth alumni.
They say who that, but you already knew that. That be them story stitches, story stitches, story stitches, story stitches, story stitches.
Welcome back to another installment of StitchCast Studio. This will be part 2 of our series on neurodivergency. We'll be furthering our conversation on fear, hate, misunderstanding. For those of you who don't understand neurodivergency, Lynn, would you mind giving a quick explanation?
Neurodivergency is a natural variation in how our brains function. There is a common misconception that the neurodiversity movement advocates against getting help, but this is not the case. One can recognize that neurodivergency is natural while still acknowledging that it can be a disability. Though it is important to recognize that many of the disabling aspects of being neurodivergent and are sometimes caused or exacerbated by living in a society not designed for us.
Okay, cool. Today we're gonna try to give you all a better understanding of ADHD and a little bit of what those of us who have and deal with it deal with. I apologize. But first I'd like to start off by giving a quick description on ADHD. So ADHD is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, a chronic condition including attention difficulty, hyperactivity, and impulsiveness. ADHD often begins in childhood and can persist in adulthood, and it may contribute to low self-esteem, troubled relationships, and difficulty at school or work. With that being said, I'd also like to cover a couple of the things that people may think they know about ADHD that could be an opinion and or misconception. So to get started, my first topic, I would like that to be not everyone who has ADHD has high energy. Now, when people talk about ADHD, you're usually talking about that really high energy, hyperactive kid in class. That's the person usually pointed out. And usually it's because not that they can't pay attention, it's just that they can't sit still. There's a lot of energy in their bodies and they want to do a lot. There's a lot of them to give, But there's also the cases where we have people who are not necessarily affected as much, and they end up being a little bit more impaired as in terms of lower energy, lack of focus, and generally just being a bit more quiet than most. Would you mind going into detail on those 3 types?
The primarily hyperactive diagnosis is like you're really impulsive and you're really hyperactive, and you may be okay executive functioning wise and focus wise. Primarily inattentive is inability to focus, maybe daydreaming too much. It's executive functioning issues, but without the hyperactivity or impulsivity. The most common, though, is combined type, where you deal with all of the above.
That's interesting, actually. I don't believe I had a knowledge of that beforehand, honestly.
Yeah, I did a lot of research on it lately, trying to find some coping mechanisms, because I've been having a lot of trouble this past year, and I needed to do something about it.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. That's it's actually one of the major reasons I have the few talents that I'm passionate about. I got into a lot of what I do now because I used to get in trouble at school because I would finish my work a bit faster than everyone else and have like nothing else to do. So I'd be up talking to a bunch of people, moving around everywhere, and it would get me in trouble a lot. And I'd get sent to either like the principal's office, the counselor's office to like either sit or like just do something with myself for the next hour or so. And I got into drawing originally. It really helped stimulate me a lot at one point. I think after I guess, growing a bit out of it and having a bit more control of myself, I kind of lost touch with drawing. But at a younger age, it was definitely one of the major coping mechanisms I had with it.
Another misconception that I want to address is that ADHD is primarily going squirrel. Like, that can be part of it for some people, but it's much, much more than that. It can feel like you want to do a task, you have the motivation to do that task, but sometimes it feels like you might as well be cutting your fingers off. You can do it quickly, but your brain does everything it can to stop you. Also, it's not an inability to focus all the time. ADHD people oscillate between in hyperfocus, which is being able to focus on one single thing for hours on end, and not being able to focus at all with not a whole lot of in between.
All right, so I would like to talk a little bit more on the focus end of ADHD and how it can affect your brain. I'd like to start by saying many people with ADHD struggle with short-term memory. Like, they can remember where they grew up, but like not what they were just talking about 3 minutes earlier. And it's a pretty annoying thing to deal with, especially if you're a very like active person, as in you're doing a bunch of things at once, or maybe you're a parent, like having a bunch of things on your plate, and you may remember the very first couple of things on your list, and then by the time you get down that list, you have no idea what you're doing or why you're moving around in the first place.
Yeah, I also have problems remembering to write things down or remembering that I wrote things down in the first place. It's annoying.
Truly. I actually have like two sets of calendars. I have the Google Calendar set up, and then I downloaded this calendar app to like push some notifications and stuff, because like I check my email a lot, but like I don't go through enough to like know what I would be doing if I had like a for the day to do list, unless like I was literally going, task by task. But it's definitely good to have some type of organization or a system set up so that things like that aren't as much of a problem, because depending on the person, it can really be an issue, or you could be the complete opposite. And instead of having issues with the short-term memory, you could quite literally just have way too much on your plate. You'll be the person that stacks a bunch up and tries to finish it all, but usually puts a bit too much more than they can handle. I feel like I'm actually in like the middle of those, to be honest.
Another thing that may affect memory or focus is sometimes we start daydreaming uncontrollably, and we could like miss what you just said or miss what instructions or what we're supposed to do, and that can be just as annoying.
Oh yeah, definitely. I space out a lot. Like I honestly, I feel like I used to daydream more as a kid, and now I literally just completely clock out. It's like a nice 2 to 3 minutes of what'd you say? Because I don't know. I guess I would have to look more into it, because like that's really something I actually like I don't have like a system for, or like something like to directly combat it.
Yeah, I'm struggling on that end too. Like I get lost in my daydreams, and I'm trying to curb them, but it's a challenge.
What kind of coping mechanisms did you use?
To be honest, I'm still trying to work that out for myself. I don't know what works well and what doesn't quite yet.
Yeah, I don't have one for myself either. I was told originally to try like even though like sometimes it may like be or sound rude, like to just like vocalize whatever you're thinking. That way, like, you're not necessarily ruining your train of thought. And it also doesn't look like you're ignoring the person. It's just like you kind of have to say what's in your head at the moment, get it out, and then you try to get back on task. Depending on the person, that can work. Like I said, for me specifically, it wasn't the best, but I'm definitely still working on trying to figure out ways to cope with that specifically. I think another important thing to touch on is that ADHD can look completely different at different times of your life. You could be in one complete category of what ADHD is in one point, and then get older and like completely experience an entirely different lifestyle. You can go from being extremely timid to being extremely outgoing out of nowhere almost. And when I say out of nowhere, I kind of do mean that, because like there's times where you could look up and like realize like you're doing something completely different to what you're used to, but it feels normal to you. It's almost like your mindset is shifted unwillingly.
Yeah, I've noticed that a little bit. Like, I've always been combined type, but I have been more impulsive lately than I would usually be. Like, that's gotten worse this past year.
Yeah, with that, I would say being self-aware is very important. Like sometimes you don't, a lot of people, honestly, like a lot of people aren't really self-aware. They kind of go based on like what they see or what people tell them. But when the more you like assess yourself, the easier it is to be keen on things like that, or at least be prepared. I know some people they kind of keep like logs of like traits that they feel like either it could be like having like a pros and cons list of what your traits are, what you do like, what you don't like, what you like to work on. Things like that, it can help progress the change of your personality, as well as keep you prepared for another change in your personality.
Next, I would like to talk about ADHD medication. There is a misconception that ADHD people seeking medication are addicts or just want speed, but that isn't the case most of the time. ADHD medications affect neurotypicals and ADHD people in different ways. Well, it makes neurotypicals is kind of high and like way too productive. It brings ADHD people to the normal level everybody else is.
Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
So ADHD medication usually, but not always, comes in the form of stimulants. ADHD people have a dopamine deficiency, and this is where the stimulants help. They raise the amount of dopamine available in the brain, and that kind of ups our levels so we can focus better, maybe sit still a bit better. Although I want to know, it does affect everybody a little bit differently. Too much dopamine is not good, and that's why neurotypicals have that bad reaction, but we have a different reaction to it. But too little, obviously, is not good either, because that exacerbates our symptoms. Now, I want to note that ADHD people may go through what is called the honeymoon period, which affects us almost like a neurotypical for the first week or two. A lot of parents of ADHD kids will rely solely on the medication, and when the honeymoon phase wears off, the kid goes back to their old habits and it seems to stop working, so they up the dose or move to stronger stimulants. But in reality, this is problematic. This could end up with a kid being on a higher dose than they really need. How it needs to be treated is the ADHD kid needs to be taught a variety of coping mechanisms before they start medication. During the honeymoon period is when they need to really focus on implementing it to the best of their ability. And when that honeymoon phase starts wearing off, a kid would be able to do tasks better than they would be off the medication. But therapy alone isn't always enough, and the medication makes it possible to do things that the kid may not otherwise be able to do. I want to add that there is a non-stimulant medication called Interlude that really works well when combined with both stimulants and dopamine and norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors, which is another kind of non-stimulant medication available to ADHD people. It can be used to keep the kid on a lower dose of a stimulant. Although it is weak on its own, I would not recommend relying on Interlude by itself. Now, the other treatment available, these are medications like Wellbutrin, and they can be used for people that don't react well to stimulants or can't take them for other reasons. Now, I want to also add that it's always important to listen to the individual on how the medication affects them. For many, stimulants help. For some, they need non-stimulants, and some can't use medication at all.
Hey everybody, you know what time it is. It's time for our Pick the City Up Art Interlude, featuring our youth guitarist, Alexis Burt. Check it out.
With me being someone who's personally never taken any medication for this specifically, I would say I don't have a broad understanding of causes and side effects and whatnot. But what I would say is, I know there were times where like I've been like having somewhat of like an episode, I would say, and like I was just like way beyond controllable, where I feel like there could have been something that could have been done medically, but without that knowledge beforehand, I wasn't able to help with it.
Yeah, I did forget to add, not all stimulants are equal. Some are weaker, some are stronger, and each person reacts to each stimulant a different way, and it can be tedious to find the right one, but just because you had a bad reaction to one doesn't always mean you're going to have a bad reaction to another.
I'll say a lot of the times, honestly, especially like older like movies and news reports and whatnot. Like again, it was kind of a scene at one point. Like there was like one type of person with ADHD, and that was like the extremely hyperactive child that was just running around and acting crazy everywhere. And like I can't stress this enough. Like that is not everyone, and in most cases, that's not ADHD. Some kids honestly are just like really high energy. That's not like a disorder. There's nothing wrong with that. And also in other cases, some kids just, may or may not have home training. Like I would like that to be understood because me personally, like I dealt with that a lot in school. Like even before I was actually diagnosed, like I would get looked at differently simply because I had a bunch of energy. This was before I showed signs of any attention issues, before any like focus problems. And like because of my grades, like it was all like I wasn't even like looked at to be diagnosed with anything. I just seemed like I was acting out most of the time.
One misconception is that ADHD people always have bad grades, and that's not always the case.
Oh yeah, my grades were like really good in school. Like my biggest, literally like all of my parent-teacher conferences were like, oh yeah, he passes his tests, but like he never stops talking, or oh his grades are good, but he's very disruptive. Like it was always a pro followed after by a con.
Yeah, I did pretty terrible remembering homework and doing my assignments, but I did test really well, like exceptionally well.
Yeah, I didn't think that was actually an ADHD thing. Like, I don't know what it is, but I don't think my body has ever liked homework. Like, I never understood the concept. I was like, we're back home now. Like, what is the purpose of this? Like, I felt like homework, studying, like, I feel like all of those things actually made my academic life harder. Like, whenever I studied for a test, I actually did significantly worse than when I would just go home and go to sleep, honestly.
Yeah, because you're spending so much energy. It's just like, for me personally, I remember what I read, I pick up the information, and even though I don't do any of the assignments and I just did the tests and did pretty well in those, I think our brains work a bit better in crisis mode. Like, I could procrastinate and like do a semester's worth of homework in the final week of the semester and still like kind of get my grades back up.
Yeah, that's actually like me now. I just recently started college, so like I found out this is the environment I've wanted my entire life. Like, we have like weekly assignments. Everything's put up at the beginning of the week. Well, technically, everything's already put up. Like, we just kind of see it in terms of the week or whatever. But like, I have all of these things that are like due by Sunday, and like Monday and Tuesday, I'll look over it and I'm like, okay, this is what I need to do. Wednesday, I'm like, all right, I'll do some reading. Let me see. Thursday, it's like, it's the end of the week almost. What should I do now? It's like, I literally like, I'll wait until almost Thursday, Friday to finally start working on assignments. And then by Saturday, I probably have like 2 or 3 left. And it's like, all right, it's 10 p.m. I got 2 hours left. Let's do it.
I just realized we kind of got distracted. We're talking about inaccurate media depictions. Another media depiction I want to touch on is that squirrel thing. Like, that's not all ADHD is. If that was all it is, my life would be a lot easier, but that's like just basic surface level thing. It's not always squirrel. Sometimes it's zoning out. Sometimes it's that we remember, but like I said, doing things is like chopping our fingers off.
Yeah, it could also be having a bunch of energy 1 second and then wanting to go home and take a nap the next.
Yeah, that's so relatable.
Like people hear those types of things, they're like, oh, depression. It's like, nah, man, I'm happy. I gotta go to sleep.
I think in my case, though, I just wear myself out bouncing off the walls, and it's just like, eventually I'm out of energy and I gotta go to sleep.
Yeah, for me, it's really depending on the day. It's like some days I'm extremely physical, and then other days I'll spend all of my energy like thinking. And by the time I want to do something physical, I'm so drained mentally, my body doesn't want to cooperate.
Yeah, that's relatable.
So, if you had a child that was experiencing early development of ADHD, what kind of tips would you give the parents to take care of the child and support them?
All right. So for me personally, the first thing I would say is be patient, because one, not understanding what's going on already, there is a cause for frustration. I do understand at times, but to be able to stay patient and be able to watch what your child does and how they react to certain things is very important, because doing that first will help you decide on how you want to help them. So you may have a child that's a bit more hyperactive than most, but they don't like doing hands-on things. So that means maybe they want to be mentally stimulated. So for that specific child, you'd get more books or like a Kindle tablet, considering the times we're in. Or you'd have the child who may be a bit more quiet but likes to be more hands-on. With that child, you'd like to give them like hobbies, things that would help them be physically stimulated in terms of like maybe like action figures or video games, or maybe going out and playing sports, or just playing outside in general can help them get that energy out, as well as help them keep their mind stimulated versus just doing a bunch of idle tasks.
Also, do a lot of research. I want to recommend this YouTuber called How to ADHD. She has a lot of helpful tips and information on ADHD, and can be a really good starting point for understanding it. And also get your child screened. And note my earlier tip about the combination of therapy and medication. And also, don't punish your kid for exhibiting ADHD traits like being too hyperactive or not getting their homework done. That can be traumatic. Instead, try to reward them when they do it, and be patient, because it takes time to get to the point where we can do things consistently, and some of us may never be able to consistently get things done. We need patience, not to be punished for something that we can't help.
Definitely. Take your time.
Other than medication, what can be done to help ADHD people? Sage, can you ask a question along those lines?
Yeah, of course. Other than therapy and medication, what else can you do to help people with ADHD?
So there isn't a ton of research on this subject yet. One thing I found that helps me personally is eating a balanced diet and getting plenty of exercise. Try to eat carbs in moderation, as that can exacerbate brain fog a little bit, and try to eat a good amount of protein, especially in the morning. Exercise and eating a balanced diet cannot treat ADHD alone, but combined with meds and therapy can help a lot. That said, it's easier said than done. A lot of the time, I'll just think I can go exercise later or cook later, and sometimes I don't even have the energy to cook to begin with. A lot of the times, I will just eat ramen or frozen dinner, and I just won't exercise.
All right. Well, I hope you all enjoyed listening. This has been another StitchCast Studio podcast. Once again, this was part 2 to our series in neurodivergency. Hopefully, we have a lot more of these in the future. This was a really great discussion, and I hope you all learned a lot. If you'd like to learn more, go to storystitchers.org and get that information.
Also, do check out How to ADHD on YouTube. Her videos are awesome.
All right, and we out.
Thank you for listening. We want to give a very special shout out to the StitchCast studio sponsors. Story Stitches is supported in part by an award from the National Endowment for the Arts, the Lewis Prize for Music's 2021 Accelerator Award. Additional support for StitchCast Studio and Story Stitches youth programs was provided by the Spirit of St. Louis Women's Fund, City of St. Louis Youth at Risk Crime Prevention Grant of 2021, Lush Corporations, the Charity Pot, and March for Our Lives Aid and Allowance. They say who that, but you already knew that. That be them Story Stitches. Story Stitches, Story Stitches, Story Stitches, Story Stitches.